$9 billion, billion with a B. That is the annual value of the US market for Kiwi exporters, according to new numbers from Stats NZ. But if we have learned anything from the first few weeks of Donald Trump's second term, it is going to be an unpredictable and volatile ride. Tim Groser is the former Trade Minister and was New Zealand's ambassador to the US in the first Trump presidency. He's with us this morning. Kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora.
How do you compare the start of this term with your experience as ambassador during the last Trump presidency?
Well, I don't think Trump himself has changed very much. It's deeply unlikely that a person of nearly 80 years old would. But I think the system around him has evolved in very important ways. I think he's much more formidable. The people around him are no longer just these monodimensional MAGA guys with baseball hats on the wrong way round. I've just come back from 10 days in Washington, met a number of the people in the Trump system. There are some very sophisticated people around him. But most of all, I think he will be utterly ruthless. So, you know, that's everybody's taking this seriously. I don't think there are any workarounds like there were last time. You may recall, Jack, the phrase, the access of adults. Oh, no, it's all right. We'll just put, General McMaster there and so on and so forth, and they'll work around. Gary Cohn can take the papers off his table and so on. I don't think that's going to work.
You're talking about resistance from within the administration.
Resistance within the more traditional conservative, so-called country club Republican lot.
Yeah.
Not going to work.
OK, well, let's talk about some of the implications. US trade policy obviously has the potential to have an immediate impact on the New Zealand economy. So let's consider the episode with the tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China. We'll talk about China in a moment. But what did you make of that episode when it came to the standoff with Mexico and Canada?
Well, first of all, a general comment that applies to trade but applies to everything. I think we're at peak Trump right now, in which he feels, after this incredible comeback, but was far from a landslide victory, I think he feels invincible, and the reality checks will get imposed on him. On the tariff increases, when he announced this incredible 25% on Canada and Mexico, General Motors and Ford were saying, you do realise, Mr. President, this will close down automotive production within 2 weeks. So, these things will impose themselves. Now, I believe it's completely wrong for us and our friends to say it's all bluster, it's all internal politics. No, it's more formidable than that. But the reactions to this will start to come into play.
Yeah. Was it all bluster? Or
No. No, I'm convinced it wasn't. On Colombia, you may recall a smaller version of this, in which he wanted to put massive pressure on Colombia with respect to deporting illegal migrants back to Colombia. Yeah, that worked on a country the size of Colombia. But on Mexico and Canada, the Canadians and the Mexicans were absolutely resolute in saying, no bloody way, we will retaliate. And I think finally people took them seriously.
Yeah, and retaliation, obviously, or the threat of retaliation rippled through the stock market. Is that what Donald Trump is making his decisions on at the moment?
Who knows? I think it's based on his long-standing deep instincts about the way the world works, which is not how perhaps you and I would see the way the world works, to put it diplomatically. But, we've seen already, for example, consumer confidence has fallen 5%. Inflationary expectations have jumped a whole percentile point. These are the realities that will impose themselves on this president, as well as a tsunami of legal challenges to the executive orders.
So the US is now New Zealand's second biggest export market. Is it inevitable that New Zealand will be hit by Trump trade policies at some point during this term?
In one sense, it's already happened, but in a deep structural sense. The final nail, frankly, in the usefulness of the WTO process has been put in place. There's a huge long-term agenda that flows out of that. Let's not go there here. We will not be the target of the administration, but bullets do ricochet. There will be collateral damage. When he put in place steel and aluminium tariffs when I was ambassador, we were not the target, of course not. But they still involved us. It didn't really matter. It was about $200 million worth of exports, and our two companies found commercial workarounds. But so collateral damage, definitely. The other damage is giving permission space to protectionist lobbies. I mean, lobbies try and maximize their position in the market. If they can take the competition out, they'll do it. Yeah. So there are various threats. Interesting to hear in a minute or two what your wine guys think of this. And they can take the form of, don't want to get too technical here, but safeguard action, countervailing duty action, that's not going to be an issue for us. Anti-dumping action, that's an issue. So the permission space, all these traders with us, the United States, they're all unfair, right? That is going to create an atmosphere where some of these groups want to take out competition from Australia and New Zealand, even though we are natural friends, partners, economically, politically with them. Yep, that could happen.
How should New Zealand prepare for that?
Well, I think New Zealand, first of all, I was thinking about this, the ancient advice of Talleyrand, the famous or infamous French foreign minister a couple of hundred years ago, applied. He said, when confronting his ambassadors, stay calm, gentlemen, stay calm. That's pretty good advice. And I'm sure the government will stay calm. Second point is that thanks to incredibly successful bipartisan policies over literally the last 50 years, we've built up a nice little insurance policy for New Zealand exports called this FTA pattern. Started with CER, the most recently was concluded by Todd, and the Prime Minister in the UAE. So we've got a lot of insurance policies in place, and now we might just have to cash them in. So, be calm, don't lose our confidence, and meet each threat with the right measured force that we can apply to the situation.
In a geopolitical context, what did you learn from your time as ambassador about the best way for countries and leaders to influence the administration? What does the president respond to?
Well, I'll come forward with an incredibly unoriginal observation. The whole global rules-based system that I've lived all of my professional life, and everyone like me has lived their lives in, this has been eroded over a period of years. It didn't start with Trump, but it's accelerated under Trump. For example, the most important norm was broken when Putin invaded Crimea in 2014. And this, by the way, interrupted, I was actually literally detained in Moscow airport when John Key, very correctly, asked me to leave Moscow immediately. So that's nothing to do with Trump. The WTO has been in a parlor state for many years. He's withdrawing from the WHO. He's withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. Happy to elaborate on that if you like. So, there's a big issue here about what do we and the countries that are our natural allies, friends, and partners do about this? This is a deep issue that needs very careful reflection. To be frank, without the United States sitting alongside us, it's a very difficult question to answer right now, Jack.
Does he respond to strength?
Oh, quite clearly, but that's not going to be the way New Zealand can play it. Now, I mean, collectively, there's obvious symmetry of interest between Canada, Mexico, the members of the European Union, Japan, Korea, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. So I would fully expect, rationally, a set of very careful discussions to unfold in the months ahead amongst those countries about what is the right response. My own view is, while we're not in a position to do this, other countries, Canada and Mexico, already having shown their willingness to do this, do need to show some strength, but they also need to understand that this is not completely about Trump, that there are serious imbalances in the system that have not been addressed and need to be addressed.
We'll talk about those imbalances in the system in a moment.
Sure.
But I'm interested in this collective response idea because obviously New Zealand is not in a position to single-handedly push back against an economy the size of the US. What might a collective response look like? And do you think a collective response can be effective to what might be considered a bit of a divide and rule strategy?
Well, how it would look like, to be completely mundane, is a series of diplomatic exchanges in the first instance, just to set out an agenda that needs to be addressed. As to the effectiveness of something, provided that there's also a clear signal to the more sensible people around the Trump administration that we hear you, United States. Some of the things that have been going on are ridiculous. We got it. That could be very helpful because, people like Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, who I very briefly met, believe it or not, out of all things, a networking function for gay Republicans. Well, a man has to do what a man has to do.
Oh, indeed, Tim.
So, they will hear that.
Yeah.
And therefore, hopefully, steer this away from destruction to creative destruction. But this has got a lot of water to flow under the bridge.
Is it totally absurd and ideological for me to suggest that, for example, a response to a tariff of 25% on Canada and Mexico is for the EU, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Brazil, all of these other economies to come together and say, right, if you pick on any one of us, we're all going to respond?
I don't think that's politically realistic, frankly. A sort of an Article 5 NATO against the United States when we're depending on the security of the United States and Europe, no. But a more nuanced, of course we will take action to protect our interests, but we hear you. I call it a sweet and sour dish.
Yeah.
That might help.
When you say we hear you and you say there are some structural issues that the US is quite right to bring to the fore, what do you mean?
Well, if you take the WTO, for example, I think I'd be in a minority of analysts on this, but I certainly am not alone, deeply believe that the setting up of the Supreme Court of the international trading system at the end of the Uruguay round, I was our chief negotiator and involved in it, was a step too far. I think if we sent, and the United States has completely destroyed it, I think a message from the most important countries, backed by useful countries like New Zealand, smaller players, that would possibly help. But you can't do this in Geneva at the moment.
No. Specifically, in what areas is New Zealand most vulnerable to the President's wrath?
Well, the President will not be directing his wrath at New Zealand in any sense whatsoever. As I said, the danger is we just get caught up as collateral damage in a bigger game. I think the generic push, and it starts before Trump, to increase the effectiveness of our defence spending is something that will be well understood by the Prime Minister and his ministers. So we've got to have a game on that. We've got to have an answer, a credible answer on that. I think we will have a credible answer, but I'm not expecting him, to pick on little New Zealand a la Colombia and squash us like a small fly on the table.
Right. But if you look at the Five Eyes and our defence spending, for example, we're at about 1% of GDP. He wants us to be at 2% of GDP. Yep. I mean, you look at the demands he's putting on other NATO countries. Surely that is a significant vulnerability for New Zealand.
It is a vulnerability. I think the government understands that. I mean, we can't possibly move to 2% quickly. Our contribution on Five Eyes is absolutely useful to us because although some cynics in the United States say it's not Five Eyes, it's Four Eyes and a blink, who the blink is. Actually, I can tell you from my own personal involvement, what New Zealand does from time to time is very much appreciated by our bigger allies.
Okay. If the world is feeling less trustful of the United States and of this administration, or if the volatility means, at the very least, that the world is slightly less trustful, how does that change the decision-making around AUKUS Pillar 2?
My own view on AUKUS is I don't like it, but I think we should join it.
Why is that?
Join Pillar 2. It's sort of the reverse of the Groucho Marx principle that I wouldn't want to join any club that would have me as a member. It's because we need to keep, we're not going to influence whether AUKUS exists or not, but we sure as hell need to hang on with our fingertips. So on my own view, it's a brutal realpolitik view. I really meant what I said. I don't like it very much, but I think we should join Pillar 2. That's because I think we need to hang on with our fingertips to cooperation with Australia and the United States. Most of all, it's about our relationship with Australia, not the United States.
But can we trust the US as part of that deal?
Well, my mother taught me never trust anybody further than they can be bounded by their self-interest. One small thing, if you're interested in climate change, you want to have a very quick take on that? Because, I was Minister for 7 years. I'm watching this withdrawal. And I know there'll be a lot of New Zealanders concerned about that. Look, is it helpful? Unquestionably no. But is it disastrous? I don't think this will have a large impact. It will have a large impact on climate change financing. But in terms of US emissions since the first international agreement on climate change came into effect in 2005.
Just to be totally clear, you're talking about the US pulling out of the Paris Agreement here.
Correct, sorry, correct. Yes.
Just
and they will do this.
Yeah.
For procedural reasons, it won't take 3 years this time.
Yeah.
US emissions have unbelievably declined by 1/3 in the period since 2005, while their economy has increased by 1/3. So they've completely decoupled the growth in emissions. Now, is this because of international climate change agreements? It has nothing to do with it. They never joined Kyoto. Kyoto was thrown out in a proxy vote by the US Senate, 95-0. The reason is because 80% of emissions in the United States come from energy. And the biggest factor, there's been other factors such as outsourcing emissions-intensive manufacturing, but the single biggest factor has been the switch from coal and oil to natural gas. Now, certain climate change fanatics hate this because they don't want a transition to carbon neutral. They just think we can just do it like that. But when the lights go out, the government of the day gets thrown out. So, do I think Elon Musk is going to go to his next boardroom of Tesla and say, back up the truck, guys, we're junking electric vehicles and going back to internal combustion engines? No. You see, I'm an optimist. I believe that the world has now worked this out and we are on an irreversible path towards decarbonising the world economy.
You've had such rich experiences over the years. So one last question before you finish up here. You said at the start of this interview that in responding to the President, New Zealand needs to lean into its insurance policies, its trade relationships and trade deals with other countries. You were Trade Minister when we tried to get a free trade deal with India the first time round. Ultimately, that was unsuccessful. What can we learn from that experience as we pursue a closer trading relationship with India now?
Well, I support 100% what Todd and the Prime Minister are trying to do. India is a really tricky customer when it comes to trade. Phil Goff had a go at doing a trade agreement. I had a go with John Key's strong support. They're having another crack at it. We didn't throw the Indians out of this giant Asia-Pacific agreement called RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic. The Southeast Asians basically got so frustrated with the Indians. So, I love the Indians. I love the Indians, and they are hugely important, obviously. I think a more limited deal might be possible, but a comprehensive total free trade, no, that's impossible. But I think we could get something that would add a little bit to our arsenal. We should go for it.
Very good. Thank you so much for your time, Tim Groser. We really appreciate it.